This is CBC Vancouver News.
We're doing the best we can with what we're dealing with.
From the coast to the interior and the north to the Kootenays, BC gets a taste of winter as snow falls on many parts of the province. Plus,
they informed me that I would have to find housing elsewhere.
She's been denied housing because of a service dog. Lawyers argue that's illegal. Also,
conserving the culture and heritage of Chinatown is the #1 thing.
Why preserving this particular piece of history is more important than ever for Vancouver's Chinatown community. Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. Well, parts of the province have ushered in their first taste of winter this weekend. A series of weather alerts and snowfall warnings were issued throughout BC, and today marked the first snowfall of the season along the south coast. In the lower mainland, it was a sight drivers haven't seen since last winter. Slick conditions set in on the roads as sleet turned to snow around midday. Environment Canada warning of 5 centimeters or more for some areas. On the North Shore, the dusting disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Sleet turned to snow and then back to rain again within an hour or two. In the interior, regions that are well used to the white stuff are getting more of it this weekend as well. Snow started falling in the Okanagan late morning, where around 10 centimeters was in the forecast. Kelowna was transformed into a winter wonderland, and by nightfall, residents were shoveling their way out. Snowfall warnings also blanketed parts of the north, including Prince George. The north and central coasts were also covered by a wind warning with gusts of up to 110 kilometers an hour. And a December dump of snow is not an unusual sight in the southeastern corner of the province either. In Cranbrook, the snow started falling early on and stuck around throughout the day. And Vancouver Island was not spared either. Some areas were also bracing for up to 10 centimeters of snow by the time it was all said and done. It made for a challenging day for those whose job it is to keep the roads clear.
I think it's people either improper tires and they don't really know how to drive to conditions. They're spinning out, they're just foot to the floor, spinning, and it just makes it icier, makes it harder. If you can't drive the conditions, stay home. It's not great out there.
Drive BC is warning of slushy and slippery conditions on the highways through tonight as well, especially at higher elevations in the mountain passes. And as temperatures hover around the freezing mark, any lingering snow will change over to rain as we see a slight warm up by tomorrow. Well, this weather wake-up call has all eyes on holiday travel. December is the busiest time of year for airlines, and last year, a storm over Christmas crippled Vancouver International Airport. Hundreds of canceled flights, piles of lost luggage, planes stranded for hours on the tarmac. Well, this year, YVR says it is better prepared. Our Michelle Morton went out to the airport to find out how this season will be different.
I'm inside the Emergency Operations Center, where behind me you see it's called the Digital Twin. It's basically tracking everything happening real time, including arrivals, departures, even baggage. And the airport says when there's any delay, they can take that information and actually communicate it to other airports. And they say when they do learn that there is a weather event happening, such as a snowstorm, that's when they'll take staff from other areas and departments and bringing them inside of here to operate it. So we just saw the Emergency Operations Center, where we learned they're now going to be tracking the baggage. So we're going to take you behind security and show you where the bags go. Right now we're downstairs in the domestic baggage hall. So YVR says they actually brought in up to 30% additional staff internally and also contracting others out so that they have more hands on deck, so that, for example, if there is a delay, they're quick to get those bags off the plane. So right now you're looking at the sorter. This is where all the bags go. They're directed to what's called the pier downstairs. It's operated by basically a computer system acting as its brain. It's telling the sorter where to push or flip the baggage so that it gets to the right pier. So this has always been in operation, I'm told. But the new quality here for this year for the winter preparedness plan is that they make sure that it can still run through the winter elements. So it's called Airside where we are right now, where thousands of passengers in the holiday season of 2022 were stuck on this tarmac for hours. But now, YVR says they brought in new protocols for this year, seeing arriving planes having access to gates within 30 minutes. Now we're going to the Airport Operations Building. To keep the tarmac clear, YVR says they purchased some new heavy-duty equipment, including this snowblower here. This is a new model, can actually clear almost double the amount than this older model here. As well, on top of that, they said that they hired additional staff and contractors to operate the equipment. Everything you just saw, including these new protocols we just learned about, was all in preparation of the approximate 2 million passengers YVR is expecting to see during the month of December. Compared to last year, that's around 250,000 more. And they expect the busiest days to be between December 20th and the 22nd. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Richmond.
In other news today in Surrey, an Amber Alert was canceled barely an hour after it went out this afternoon. It ended with a missing 2-month-old girl found safe and a 28-year-old man arrested. RCMP say they had spoken with the suspect this morning. He'd been in a vehicle with the infant before taking off. Not long after, officers saw that vehicle again before it fled a second time. That's when police say they received information that led them to believe the infant was in imminent danger, triggering the Amber Alert. The suspect remains in custody. Police in Mission, meanwhile, have pinpointed a vehicle they suspect is linked to a shooting this week in a grocery store parking lot. Shots went off around 7:30 Wednesday night outside this superstore on Lougheed Highway. A 41-year-old man was found shot inside a vehicle and a pickup truck was riddled with bullets. Police now say that man suffered serious injuries and is believed to have ties to BC's ongoing gang conflict. Investigators are asking anyone who saw this gray Jaguar SUV around the superstore that night to contact them right away. For the second weekend in a row, the emergency department at South Okanagan General Hospital is closed due to a doctor shortage. The ER in Oliver is normally open 24/7, but has had to shut its doors from 6 o'clock this evening until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Ongoing problems with physician availability have forced its closure at least 4 times already in the past 2 weeks. Patients who need urgent care are being redirected to Penticton in the meantime. Over to the Kootenays now, where a Cranbrook woman claims she has been denied housing because of a possible service animal. But as our Corey Bullock is finding out, lawyers say that's a violation of BC's Tenancy Act.
For years, Chantel Briggs has been dreaming of getting a service dog. She was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and schizophrenic affective disorder when she was a teenager.
It's hard because I'll disassociate. And when I'm disassociated, I know that what I'm seeing isn't real, but I don't know what is real. And that's when the service dog would have came in.
She lives in Cranbrook in temporary housing, and in September she learned she had been accepted for permanent housing through Chinatown Housing Society. She was excited to sign the paperwork and get the keys until
I mentioned that I'm on the wait list for a service dog for complex PTSD, and they informed me that I would have to find housing elsewhere.
But as this tenant advocate explains, it's against the rules for the Housing Society to deny her housing because of a service animal.
The Residential Tenancy Act specifically states that landlords cannot put restrictions on pets if they are service animals.
He says it's also an infringement on human rights.
So specifically denying someone housing because of a disability is a pretty clear infringement of the Human Rights Code and discriminatory.
Chinatown Housing Society sent a letter to CBC News explaining it could not comment on the matter, stating, quote, "We are unable to provide any comments or statements to the press regarding specific tenant or applicant matters." Patterson says it's tough to pursue legal action in this type of situation because no actual tenancy was formed.
Oftentimes for folks who are desperately looking for housing, doesn't necessarily make sense to jump right away into litigation if that litigation isn't going to get you what you need immediately, which is that housing.
And now Briggs is stuck wondering where she will live with just 6 months left on her current contract.
So I'm nervous, especially because housing doesn't come up fast enough. There's very limited housing in Cranbrook.
For now, she is thankful to have a roof over her head, hoping she won't have to choose between a home and a service dog. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
It has been 20 years since the Chinatown Memorial monument was built, and dozens gathered today to mark its anniversary. Lately, it has served as a powerful symbol in the controversy over a new condo development set to be built on Kiefer Street. With that building proposal now approved, neighbors say it's more important than ever to remind people about Chinatown's rich heritage. Janella Hamilton has that story.
20 years ago, Arthur Su Ren Cheng sketched this commemorative sculpture on paper, a piece of history that has become the focal point of what the community now calls a sacred space.
It's home to the community's Remembrance Day ceremonies. It is the site of all sorts of commemoration and activity.
For Cheng, the Chinatown Memorial Monument pays homage to the thousands of Chinese Canadians who lived and died while building the Trans-Canadian Railway system, and the hundreds who put their lives on the line during World War II. Wendy Au is a former city planner who was part of the initial project in 2003.
It's really about educating, our own Chinese young people, but also the Canadian as a whole, Canadian society, about the Chinese, sacrifice and the contributions to build this country.
But Cheng worries the meaning behind the monument may be diminished when a 9-story condo tower is built next to Memorial Square, where the structure stands.
This sculpture, this monument is already part of the legacy, part of what makes Chinatown, what makes Vancouver. This is already part of the heritage.
In June, the city approved the application from developer BD Living for a condo building on Kiefer Street under certain conditions. Community groups had argued the development would not fit within the character of the historic district.
There was no real attempt to say that's an incredibly important space.
The updated proposal will now require developers to involve the Chinatown arts community in planning the architecture of the final building, a tower the city says must complement the cultural significance of its neighbors.
Conserving the culture and heritage of Chinatown is the number one thing that we have to. This is the only Chinatown that has a lot longer history than any other Chinatown across the country. And there's also, a hope that we're going to be, asking for UNESCO destination down the road.
Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, this week marked a historical moment, not only for this province, but for the entire country. Leonard Marchand has been appointed as Chief Justice for BC and the Yukon. From the Silks Okanagan Nation, he's the first Indigenous person to ever serve in this role.
I spend time with lawyers and judges and well-to-do people, but I've also spent a lot of time with people who have been traumatized, who've experienced a lot of loss in their lives, who struggle with substance use disorder, mental health issues, and so on. And so, I think having had all of those experiences really enhances the way that I try to make my decisions and dispense justice in a good way.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the announcement yesterday, saying Marchand brought a wealth of experience to his position and would serve the people of BC and Yukon well. He previously worked as a lawyer in Kamloops and served at all 3 levels of the BC court system. Well, Vancouver's Union Gospel Mission is bringing the holiday spirit to people in need this weekend. The charity is providing turkey dinners for low-income people, and it's the 30th year in a row. We stopped by the downtown east side today to check it out.
So today is our annual Christmas meal, and we're hoping to serve around 3,000 turkey dinners with all of the fixings, including gravy, stuffing, pie, a massive amount of turkey. It took 2,000 pounds of turkey to make today possible. We have been doing this Christmas meal for well over 30 years, and we plan to continue having a Christmas meal every year as long as the community needs one. It's an opportunity for folks to come together, to feel valued, and for those who are really struggling, hopefully get to know some of our outreach workers and learn about our services like recovery or our emergency food hampers for families. So it's a special and important day.
I consider the UGM to be the hand of God in my life, because as an immigrant coming to a new country, not knowing what I'm facing, as someone from Africa with a name like Abdul Karim, I never expected a Christian organization to accept me into their home. It's a great day for people to come around, for all the fallen apples to find a basket, to collect them and feed them. I consider myself to be a fallen apple, and having the UGM as a collector and a place to have a nice meal prepared with love is something I couldn't ask for more.
Up next, we return to the COP28 climate summit in Dubai, and the topic of phasing out fossil fuels is causing some division between countries. We'll have that story straight ahead. Stay with us. Meanwhile, let's take you to the Middle East now, and Israeli forces have issued a new evacuation warning in southern Gaza. This comes after the U.S. vetoed a United Nations resolution calling for a ceasefire. The CBC's Chris Reyes has the latest.
Engulfed in grief with no end in sight, this is Khan Yunis after another Israeli strike. With destruction like this one, a university flattened in the south of Gaza City, all signs point to even more grief to come. That's clear with just one look inside Gaza's last few standing hospitals. With aid barely trickling in, it's what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres described as Gaza staring into the abyss. Aid workers on the ground confirm it.
80% of the population, some 1.8 million people, have been displaced. Half of the population are starving. 9 out of 10 are not eating every day. I mean, obviously the needs are massive.
Hopes of stopping Israel's offensive with a resolution demanding a ceasefire was shut down at the Security Council on Friday, with the U.S. using its veto power to vote against it. On the streets of New York, immediate demonstrations in support of Palestinians after the vote.
And it makes me very ashamed that my government is doing this in my name.
From Turkey's Tayyip Erdogan, strong condemnation of the U.S. veto.
Ama biz ne diyoruz?
A just world is actually possible, but not with America, he told the audience at a human rights conference in Turkey, adding that the Security Council must be reformed. From Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, defiance over putting an end to the war. He thanked the U.S. for its support at the Security Council. Adding to that support, today the Biden administration said that it's approved an emergency sale of tank ammunition worth more than $100 million, bypassing Congress approval. Krish Reyes, CBC News, New York.
In Dubai, the COP28 climate summit still faces divisions on phasing out fossil fuels. Several countries want air pollution measures to be the only commitments. For many countries, though, fossil fuel phase-out is the critical commitment. The CBC's Susan Ormiston is there with more.
A busy afternoon here at COP28 in Dubai. There's been a large protest here for many causes, climate justice, also a ceasefire in Gaza, one of their demands, and a lot of discussion again about the role of fossil fuels in COP28. We are learning that OPEC, the Secretary General, sent a letter to member nations whose delegations are here, asking them to reject any language about phasing out or phasing down fossil fuels. It says that there will be irreversible consequences if that gets into the final document, which is negotiated here. So that's reverberating around the conference, and negotiators are now looking at various iterations of text for that final agreement, which should come out on the 12th, a few days from now. It will be changed and worked on through the next few days. A quieter issue today here at COP28 is the role of nature. It would seem obvious that nature and climate are linked, but actually in international negotiations ever since the Earth Summit in 1992, those two things have been separated. So that's why last year Montreal co-hosted an international conference on biodiversity. Today, what the COP said today is that we agree these should be linked, that decisions about climate also affect nature, and they should be considered when we're considering strategic decisions by countries and also about financing. So to understand that a little bit better, we spoke to a woman from the Indigenous Peoples Forum.
It's high time. I think it's long overdue, but very, very welcome that we have ministers pledging to work on both nature, biodiversity, and climate change. It gives nature more power because, you know, sometimes climate solutions can be nature blind. For example, in my territory, reforestation efforts were undertaken as part of action on climate change, but they chose species that really were alien to the area and that were sucking up so much water.
We're working down to the final 3 days here at COP28. Many issues on the table. Delegations are negotiating behind closed doors to see whether we will have any mention of fossil fuels and many other issues in this final agreement. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Dubai.
You're looking at a live shot of a slightly foggy BC place, and parts of the province had its first real taste of winter today. How the system will translate into your Sunday forecast is coming up next.
we're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. For 37 years, British Columbians have been donating to food banks at CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day, raising more than $18 million for food banks in BC. December 1st kicked off the annual charity drive and continues to the end of the month. We thank you for generously donating and supporting local communities in our province. Make the season kind and donate until December 31st at cbc.ca/foodbankday.
And let's take a look at the forecast, and certainly a busy day weather-wise province-wide. Here's what we're looking at for our overnight lows. We are still hovering around that freezing mark through a large swath of BC, so the precipitation will continue. Of course, it just depends how cold we get. It might fall as snow, perhaps as rain. Most likely a lot of sleet in many areas. Here's how it looks as that system moves through. That frontal system is going across the interior, still bringing some snow through the higher elevations tomorrow as it pushes east to the Alberta border. And then otherwise will be mainly dry through most parts for the next few days. But until we get there, we do still have a few snowfall warnings in effect. For Highway 3, the Kootenay Pass, expecting 15 centimeters overnight. Warnings of reduced visibility there. Also, the Yellowhead Highway further north, that's all the way to the Alberta border. 10 centimeters more is expected tomorrow. And for the Cariboo region, for Prince George especially, another 5 centimeters is expected tonight. So do watch for that as we see the system clear out. Here's our daytime highs for tomorrow. Again, not very warm. We are a lot chillier than we've seen through most regions, and still some precipitation. In Vancouver, though, that will likely switch over to rain. Any of that remaining snow will fall as rain, so it will have all melted by the time it's all said and done on the south coast here. Still fairly warm. Seasonal temperatures nearly hitting those double digits, but then we'll dry out once we get past Sunday and just see some off and on breaks of sunshine through the rest of the week. And that is your late news for this Saturday, December 9th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.